Welcome to Empowered to Grow, the podcast. I am your host, Hanan and Basha, the business doctor. Following our conversations with empowered women who woke up one day and consciously claimed, I am more than enough, I am worthy, I am empowered to grow. And along their empowering journey towards realizing their own potential and their quest for growth, they became a beacon of hope and guidance for others. May you also find your inner power to grow. Hello again, everyone, and welcome to the Unchartered discussions of Empowered to Grow. I'm your host, Hanan and Basha, and I'm still with the energizing Nischa Phair. Nischa, hi, how are you?
Hi, I'm great. How are you?
Fine, thank you. Energized by our discussion, as I said. Nischa is an author and a researcher and a pleasure educator, which also entails talking about trauma and being a survivor herself. That's where her work has stemmed for. Nischa, I want to start, we discussed a few topics in our initial episode, but
neuroendocrine system. And it requires a healthy neuroendocrine system in order to be able to function optimally. So I really, in my work, like that because a lot of the people who find me have had difficult experiences in relationships. I like to go way back to the beginning and look at like the pleasure of a sunset, the pleasure of walking barefoot on warm stones, the pleasure of watching light spilling in through a window, the pleasure of a warm bath on a cold day. So these really sensory pleasures, and using them to prove to my body that I'm safe, that it's okay to receive goodness, it's okay to feel good, and that nothing bad is going to happen to me if I allow myself the abundance of this sensory experience.
I love that. And as you said, it translates into very small acts that exist in our everyday life. We don't have to go out of our way for those sensory pleasures but it does take an awareness to start recognizing them and kind of tracking them. So you're kind of, let's audit all the small sensory pleasures that we have on a daily basis.
Yes, big time. So a lot of the work I do is around helping people cultivate a pleasure practice, because pleasure is a practice in our world today, in the state of things as they are. There are, every time we look at a screen, every time we talk to someone on the phone, there are more and more forces, incidences, notifications eating away at our well-being, at our pleasure, at our experience of feeling just okay in the world, not even like orgasmic, just okay. Right?
Yep.
So in the cultivation of a pleasure practice, some of the things that we do involve, I call it like a pleasure, turn your house into a pleasure obstacle course. So put things in your way that will force you to trip over a really nice smelling flower, or putting essential oils by your desk that you can like rub on your hands and smell every few minutes. So really, we have to, again, sort of to pick up from the last conversation, if it's not feeding you, it's feeding on you.
Yeah.
Part of that philosophy asks us to nourish ourselves with things that do feed us, and to live a life that is just full of all of those things that we can control, because that is really the reality of our reality right now, is there's so many things that are completely out of our control. But pleasure is within our control. I can choose to put a rose on my bedside, and so that the first thing I look up at in the morning when I open my eyes is something beautiful. I can choose to hold my coffee closer to my chest a little bit longer and breathe it in for 5 minutes and just really let that aroma soak into every single one of my cells. I can choose all of these things that are free. They're free. They don't cost a penny. You don't need therapy. You don't need any special treatment or protocol or equipment. These are things that we can just do simply by choosing to experience goodness and delight, and things that taste good, like really juicy, delicious fruits, and a really nice warm hug with a partner. So I really think that, these things are everywhere once we start looking for them, but it's a matter of tuning, recalibrating our bodies and our awareness to be able to see them really, and to then start instituting more of them into our daily lives and how we live.
You've said something really important here. You said choosing to see them. And I know with trauma, and I'm not the specialist over here, so I would love for you to shed a bit of light there. I know definitely with trauma, part of trauma response is believing that you have no choice. I know I went through that, going through forms of abusive situations and relationships, that I have no choice. I've got to endure it because I have no choice. And thus, one day I woke up to realize I have a choice, and I'm paying the price anyway. I might as well pay the price in something that, I choose, rather than paying a forced price in something that, as you said, is speeding on me. So this part of your work, or is this the starting point? Switching that I have no choice to there is a choice, and that choice entails the very small, free, and available acts to you.
Definitely. To your point about trauma responses, the other thing about, so I can have a trauma response at the moment, and then the effect of having to either live in that same circumstance or not getting to heal from that trauma response means that I can start to, I call it a cast. I wear this body cast, really.
Mm-hmm.
And the story of that body cast isn't just I don't have a choice. It's I can't feel good. I'm not good. My health and well-being don't matter. Death is imminent, right? And so this is where, and I talk about this in the book, that scarcity is not a mindset, it's a tissue state. These are all of the thoughts that we're having, the experiences of ourselves, all, again, those really mean voices in our heads. They're not just thoughts, they're part of the complex of the stress responses, or the body cast that we can start to wear when we have to use our stress responses over a long period of time. So anytime we can interrupt that tissue state, whether it's by dancing for a few minutes, going for a walk, looking at a window at a beautiful day, then I can pull myself out of that, whether it's hypo or hyper arousal, that triggered state, and I can move myself into what's called parasympathetic ground, which is the rest and digest, feed and breathe part of our nervous systems.
Yeah.
And what's beautiful about this transition is that parasympathetic ground is for pleasure production. It's where we're most available to connection with other people, where we're most emotionally regulated. It's where we're really good listeners. It's where we like to laugh, and it's where we're most creative, but it's also where we are most aligned and connected to our personal, emotional, and spiritual truth. So I've used this whole idea of, I hate using the word hack, but pleasure tools as ways of pulling ourselves out of this track, because that's really what it is. It's just a track, and it gets more and more worn down, and it becomes a rut, and it's so comfortable, and like those little crabs that are pulling us back in.
Exactly.
We don't just have the people around us acting as crabs, we have the stories in our own bodies. And especially if you have wounded younger parts in there, those wounded parts are going to be like, no, come back here.
Exactly.
Don't go feeling good after, you need to stay here and hurt, because it's safer when we know what the threats are, right?
Yeah. Your book and the topic of your book, Fawn.
Yes.
And fawning. I would love to delve a little deeper into that, because the concept of people pleasing and the concept of accepting certain standards, acts, emotions even, as that's okay. I'll let this one go. I'm okay with this, and convincing yourself that it is acceptable one way or another, just so you please your partner, please your environment, and really not cause any ripples. Can we delve a bit deeper into that, please?
Absolutely. So the thing about Fawn that's really interesting in terms of where we are socioculturally today is that Fawn, while it is a biological stress response that many different mammals, humans included, may avail of, it's socially conditioned within our conditioning of gender. So it's women are socially conditioned to do it, and men are socially conditioned to expect it and benefit from it. Wow. Now this is made, right? And we're gonna go right down that rabbit hole because it's a bit of a head trip. And then if you were raised in a turbulent home or in a home where you weren't allowed, a lot of people who may have been raised in the children are to be seen and not heard school of parenting. Yeah. Here. So all of these components can then reinforce fawning for us. And do you want to go back into the social conditioning? I saw you light up when we talked about that.
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay.
That is one of the main things. Go ahead.
That's one of the main things I talk about now, because realizing that and as you said, the female social conditioning is so strong as well. And that is a thing why actually I wanted to have these conversations with women from around the world, is speaking to women around the world. I realized we all go through the same conditioning. It's just different, slightly different, kind of attributions, cultural attributions and stuff, but it's very similar to, and the bottom line was, you can't, you won't, you shouldn't. I'm like, oh my God, now I'm rewriting the narrative for myself of, yes, I can, yes, I will, so that's why I when you're like, this is part of the social conditioning that women or females are expected to do it and males are expected to expect it. I'm like, oh my God, we've been set up that way.
Totally. And this is where it's this kind of, I call it the Bermuda Triangle of dating and relationships, but it's happening everywhere. And again, I talk about this in greater detail in the book, but at no time was there a round table of Machiavellian sociopaths that sat down and said, okay, so patriarchy, let's figure this out. How are we going to oppress people? How are we going to make people feel awful? How are we going to steal their agency and overpower them every single day? There wasn't. Where we are now is the result of 100,000 years of reinforcing our stress responses. So fawn is a biologically female response. Women are far more predisposed to it because of our sexual hormones, and also because we are more likely to produce oxytocin, and we benefit from oxytocin. It's one of the ways that we mitigate stress and overwhelm for ourselves.
Okay.
Our definitions of gender have been created, and it's completely subconscious, by our gendered stress responses. So fawn, also known as tend and befriend, which is the tendency to nurture, to care for, to be emotionally regulated. Fawn is a more female response, and sympathetic drive, that kind of fight flight, is a more typical male response. So right there we have intimidation and submission. And that is really the story when we're talking about all forms of oppression. It's a relationship of intimidation and submission. And those stress responses, that is sympathetic nervous system and fawning or tending and befriending, also known as the parasympathetic nervous system, or the part of the parasympathetic nervous system that is responsible for triggering hypoarousal. So I'm going to pull back because I feel like that was
that was
a bit.
You said, we need to understand how our biology works, because again, I'm not saying that we should be going against our biology, but understanding how to harness our biology for our own benefit. And I think that's the work you are doing now, right?
100%. I mean, this is one of the things that I try to encourage people to aim for, is to be more than your biology, to understand those responses and be more than them, because it's not just women who have to be more than their biology, men and non-binary people do too, because our biology is hundreds of thousands of years in the making, and it's all been designed around how do we survive? How do we survive this ice age? How do we survive this holy war? How do we survive this Roman or Spanish Inquisition or whatever? It's just all about survival. And if we truly want to thrive as a species and as a society, we need to be more than our biology. So just to give you an idea of how this kind of starts for us, because it doesn't start when we're, teenagers or adults, doesn't start when we're women having babies. It starts when we're it starts really early. By the age of 3, children, particularly young girls, are aware of their bodies, and they're aware of their relationship to the information that's coming in about their bodies. So there's a really amazing little, I think it was a TikTok that I saw not too long ago. And it was this little 2-year-old girl, and she was Black, and she had, really tight curls, and she had to wear a little bonnet to bed to make sure that her curls don't get all frizzy overnight. And she kept taking it off, and her mom, couldn't figure it out. And then she got a little cartoon. There was a little cartoon, video that showed there were 2 little girls of color, and then there was one white girl who was like, why are you wearing that thing? And they went through this whole thing of why the bonnet is amazing and what it helps, the hairdo, and why they should want to wear it. And within a very short time of just being 2 years old, of watching this little cartoon, she was loving her bonnet, she was loving her hair, she was feeling more confidence about herself. Yeah. So that's how young we are when we're starting to interpret the messages that are coming from the media and from our homes. Yeah. Yeah. What happens in terms of biologically at the age of 7 or 8, when we start to go through puberty and our hormones start changing, the increase in estrogen that young girls start to experience, it increases their self-awareness, it increases their awareness about their environment, it increases their emotional intelligence, but it also decreases their self-confidence. So we have that biologically happening in tune with all of the messaging that's coming from social media saying your hair isn't right, your body isn't right, your face isn't right, your skin isn't right, your voice isn't right? That you have to be different than who you are. At the same time as those girls are going through these heightened experiences of self-awareness and reduced confidence, young boys are getting, with testosterone, they're getting more confidence, they're getting risk-taking behavior, and the testosterone is encouraging them to push boundaries. So we have these biologically wired to submit and intimidate. It's in our DNA. And so this is something that if we don't get ahead of it while we're in our teen years, we'll take right into adulthood.
Wow. Yeah, that's fascinating. And when I started my healing journey, when my healing journey started, I started doing a lot of reading and listening and, tuning into everything and everyone that speaks of topics and stuff. I started becoming a lot more aware, as you said, of my own triggers and the stories, and sometimes even I'm able to pinpoint the situation, or that I call it imprints now. I believe that every person and every situation that we meet across our lives leaves an imprint on us, positive or negative, empowering or disempowering. And I realized that I could go back sometimes and track the imprint of when this shifted my narrative, this shifted my perspective on something. And thus I started becoming a lot more aware now. We have a son, he's 11. And I started becoming a lot more aware in our conversations of what I'm saying to him, how I'm saying it to him, just to be able to be as aware as possible. I know he will have his own issues. I'm hoping not a lot of traumas, but at least I'm putting in the best effort to have these uncomfortable conversations and talk about, how we should be dealing with girls and, growing up and how he should be feeling about himself and the thought process that he should be considering, and, even privilege that he's got or lack of, whatever it is. Awareness is a big thing. And again, we weren't raised with this kind of awareness.
Not at all. I'm amazed, when I think about it, like you're having these conversations with your son at 11. It's so encouraging to me. And also it's like, just imagine what these kids are going to be like at 20.
Yeah.
Right? Like when they've had an extra 10 years of these insights and the benefiting of the emotional intelligence of their parents. Like, I really do feel hopeful about our future. I do. Yeah. Because the extent of, my parents didn't talk to me about racism, although I was very quick to point it out in them, which they did not like growing up. But the only bit of information that I got about, sex and bodies was like, there will be hair. Here's a razor. It was very like
we didn't. I'm Egyptian. I live in the Middle East. And these conversations don't happen. I didn't have these conversations. I didn't even have them when I got married. It was like, okay, just take care of yourself. If you need anything, let me know. And it was like, that was a conversation with my mom. My dad wouldn't even try to talk about it. And those are the kind of things that, so again, you depend on the friends and well, there wasn't social media then, but, you depend on other sources of information that might not necessarily be helpful. They might actually, as you said, they might be imprinting in a way that harms us and harms our own self-esteem. And exploring pleasure or having that kind of a relationship with your partner, saying, let's explore here and let's see what we enjoy together. And let's talk about it even. This is definitely not typical. I know it's definitely not typical in the Middle East. And I know that it's even not typical in Europe and the States.
In North America. Yeah. We weren't taught, at all. And I think it's not, we weren't taught how to have difficult conversations, period, or how to communicate. Yes, many of us,
that's true.
We were taught to be quiet and say yes and obey and, do what you're told and get good grades. And that's it. We were never taught how to express ourselves or, how to connect with what felt authentic. So I think that we have to really, one of the things that I really try to encourage people to see is that lowering your expectations of yourself is an act of grace, right? And knowing that like it's going to feel weird and uncomfortable. And like anything, like if you had never ridden a bike until the age of 30 or 40 years of age, it would be weird and scary. It would be wobbly and you'd probably fall off, And so we have to really incorporate that understanding and that self-compassion with ourselves when we're having conversations about sex and pleasure in our relationships, because they're not easy and no one taught us how to do them. And so it's just a matter of having compassion for one another too. I think that's something that's really missing in a lot of relationships, especially in casual ones or in relationships where, maybe resentment has kind of gone on longer than it should have. And there may be longstanding issues there. Compassion tends to go out the window pretty quickly.
Yeah, that's true.
And it tends to be the person who is the people pleaser that has the compassion as opposed to the other person. So.
Okay. I want to end with this question.
Okay.
If we, Okay, it's a two-part question. The first part is, if I've never had this conversation before with myself or with my partner, first of all, how do I recognize that I am a people pleaser? Like, what are the telltale signs that I would like, okay, I've got to have it. And then the second part of the question is, what are the first steps do I start doing? That I start taking, or, what do I start doing about it?
Okay, so just to clarify, we're coming back to talking about fawn and how to kind of dismantle that for ourselves, right?
Yes.
So I think the first thing, and I'm going to compare it again to fight flight because it tends to be the one that people can recognize more easily. Fight flight is really obvious. We know what it feels like in our bodies when our hearts are racing or when we feel anxious. Like, that's really obvious and clear. Fawn is so much subtler.
Okay.
So what happens when a fawn response is triggered is all of our connection to our organs below our diaphragm gets disrupted or cut off. And so what you may feel is a feeling of lack of feeling. Another thing that a lot of people notice is a feeling of heaviness, maybe through your chest or maybe in your belly, a feeling of contracting, maybe like you're kind of moving away from whatever the target or the source of the people pleasing is. Because fawning, we can mix it with other stress responses. It can also feel like really, okay, I'll take care of this, really almost participatory and I don't want to say keyed up, but maybe a little bit more active.
Okay.
Right. So it really, it's tricky because it has a lot of different faces, but I'd say the clearest, one of a few of the clearest is a feeling like you can't talk, or like you can't talk authentically. Some people are like, oh yeah, that's fine, even when it's completely not. Or a feeling of just clamming up completely. So maybe like jaws shut. I know when that used to happen to me, it felt like my lips were just sewn shut and I just couldn't open them. And that happens because when the stress response is triggered, all of the blood flow moves out of our language center and our speech centers. So we literally lose the connection to our language center in our brain when the response is triggered. Yeah. And so this also has long-term effects in terms of being able to use your voice authentically. So the voice piece is a big one. Some people feel a feeling of like disgust and resentment, a kind of like, oh, I don't want to do this, but I'm going to do it anyways. So that can be obvious for some people. The one that's really kind of comes forward is just this feeling of shrinking. Right. And so either moving away from the person or just like your energy shrinks and kind of squelches down, that instead of feeling like you can move around and like you can, move your arms and your body around, it's just this feeling of immobility. So there's sort of somatic qualities as opposed to those loud, heart racing, anxiety, lashing out. Sympathetic activation is very expressive and loud, and fawning or hypoarousal activation it's quiet. So we really have to be looking at the behaviors is sometimes a little bit easier. So if you are going along with something that you don't want to do, saying yes to things that you'd really not rather be involved in, but you feel like you have to keep the family together or to keep someone happy, right? And the other thing, and I just want to inject here a little bit of an invitation for self-compassion, because another one of the effects of fawn, which makes it so difficult to identify, is that the stress response is inhibiting our awareness of ourselves at the body level. Yeah. So some people can fawn for years and not know it because their awareness is being inhibited. So be gentle.
Yeah.
Have compassion.
I always say
your
that.
process.
Whatever it is, be gentle with yourself. Hold yourself.
There's no no fast moves. I mean, this is the thing with Fawn, is that we only discovered it in 2000. The stress response itself was discovered in 2000. It was named only in 2013.
Wow. Okay.
Right. So this is all like, we're at the frontier of trying to understand what this means for us as women, as people in relationships, as parents. So I really hope to inspire people to be curious, as opposed to like go on the attack and go for the jugular for things. Instead, just like lean back and try to notice and really connect with what's happening on the body level.
Is therapy the best approach to deal with fawning, and to start, kind of disintegrating the reasons and seeing what to do next about it?
If the therapist is educated in fawn and is attuned to the fact that their client may fawn with them, because that's the other thing, we can fawn through our personal growth. We can fawn with our therapists and go along with things because they're the ones with the degrees and they've done all the work and they know. So I guess, right? So again, this is new material. This is new content for people. And I think that as long as your therapist is aware of the possibility of triggering fawn in their clients, then yes, therapy can be very helpful. But most of my coaching clients see me for maybe 5 or 10 sessions. A lot of I really feel like self-directed work and learning to trust yourself. You can't go to therapy for that. No amount of therapy is going to make you trust yourself. It's about like really connecting with your body and learning to really honor your own intuition and your own instincts.
Okay.
Yeah.
I love that. So definitely come to you
yes, they can come to me. They can go to, for sure.
Nischa, thank you so much. You've definitely shared a lot of insights into a topic that I know most of the people I personally know, including myself, we've been fawning one way or another. As you're talking, a lot of examples are coming up for me. It's like, the time, that I accepted, we wanted to go to the movies, but, my friend said, no, we're going to go somewhere else. I was like, okay, I don't want to rock the boat. Let's just do this for this time. Or, even those small things, or the accepting things at work, in a work or in a relationship of sorts, friendship or romantic, that I'm not comfortable with, or I don't want to do, or, I'm just, or maybe that's not how I feel right there and then, but also accepted it. And I thought people pleasing it's amazing that you've, how you've highlighted that it is a biological response as well, because there were also times where I realized, especially when I was uncomfortable in a work setting, that I would somehow, and I know that my body is very psychosomatic, it always manifests the symptoms really fast, but there will be those times where I just suddenly I get a cold and I lose my voice. And reflecting back, and I know I had this reflection recently, it's always been some situations where I felt very uncomfortable, and I lose it. And that apparently
protection.
Exactly. My body was protecting me one way or another. So thank you so much. This has really been a very interesting and insightful conversation.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been a real treat to connect with you.
Me too. Well, as Nischa said, stop, breathe, and listen to yourself, listen to your body, tune in, give yourself the space and the grace that whatever's happened, it's not your fault. It's just how our biology has been set up for us. And just put in the effort and the awareness to know where to go from here. And we have professionals and researchers and experts like Nischa who are equipped to support us to be able to find the pleasure in our life on every front, and more importantly, understand how and when we can consent in a way that does not harm us biologically. So I wish you awareness, and I wish you love, and I wish you abundance and prosperity. As always, thank you for joining us, and I'll see you next time. Bye for now. Thank you for listening to the Empowered to Grow podcast. For further engagement with a tribe of empowered women, join my Facebook group, Empowered to Grow, or visit my website, www.hananulbasha.com. I'll catch you on the next episode. And until then, know that empowered you empowers others. Love, abundance, and prosperity to you all.